The night felt colder after that sound, as if the very air around them carried a warning, but they tried to shake it away. They told themselves it was only an echo, some old machine groaning underground, yet the look in their eyes betrayed what they really felt. Back inside the main building, they found rooms filled with broken furniture, shattered glass, and walls covered in peeling paint. Everything smelled of dust and rust, but underneath there was another scent, strange and metallic, almost like burned wires mixed with something alive. The woman ran her hand across a table covered in dust and noticed long scratches cut deep into the surface, not the kind made by tools but something with claws. She pulled her hand back quickly, her heart racing. The man tried to laugh, saying it must have been vandals or wild animals, but his voice cracked, thin and uncertain. They moved deeper into the building, and the beam of the flashlight caught something strange on the far wall. It was a large symbol painted in faded red, a warning sign perhaps, with words almost erased by time. Only one word was still clear: danger. The letters were uneven, as if painted in a hurry by someone desperate to send a message before running away. The sight made them both silent, and in that silence, they heard it again, the same deep rumble they had heard outside, only closer, echoing through the hollow walls of the base. They froze, gripping their lights tight, their eyes wide in the dark. The man whispered that it must be the wind again, though his voice betrayed doubt, and the woman shook her head, her skin crawling with the sense that something was alive here, something that was never meant to be found. They decided to search the yard again, to make sure nothing dangerous was there. Stepping back into the open air, the night felt even heavier, the stars dimmed as if clouds were swallowing them. They walked slowly, scanning every corner with the flashlights. They noticed old cages stacked near the fence, their metal bars bent outward as though something inside had broken free long ago. The ground near the cages was scorched black in strange circular marks. It looked like burns, but not from fire, something hotter, stranger. Then, at the far edge of the yard near the locked gate, they saw it. A shape moved in the shadows, huge and heavy, the chains rattling with every shift of its body. They could not see it fully, but the flash of scales glimmered faintly in the beam of their light before the creature pulled back into the dark. The sound it made was not an ordinary growl but something deeper, layered, like a voice that was more than sound, pressing into their minds. The woman gasped, feeling her heart hammer in her chest, while the man grabbed her hand, pulling her slowly back. They could not stop staring into the darkness, where they knew eyes were watching them. Then the shape leaned forward, just enough for them to see it clearly. A head, massive and crowned with horns, scales dulled with age yet still glowing faintly as though fire lived beneath the skin. A dragon. Their breath caught at the impossible sight, their bodies frozen between fear and awe. The dragon's wings were folded tight against its body, but they could see heavy chains locking them down, thick metal wrapped around its neck and chest. It shifted again, the chains scraping loudly against the stone, and its golden eyes caught their light, burning with something both ancient and sorrowful. They wanted to run, but the weight of its gaze held them. It was not wild, not mindless, it was intelligent, and in that moment they felt it was trying to speak without words. The woman whispered that it was suffering, and she was right. Every scar, every chain spoke of long years of pain. The dragon gave another low rumble, softer this time, almost like a plea. The sound filled the air, vibrating in their bones, making them shiver with both fear and compassion. They did not know what kind of creature this was, or why it had been left here, but they knew one thing for certain: this was no ordinary animal. This was something greater, something powerful, something that should not have been forgotten. The man whispered that they needed to leave, that they had seen enough, but the woman shook her head slowly, unable to turn away. She felt a strange pull, a connection she could not explain, as if the dragon's eyes were asking her to stay, to understand. They stood there for what felt like forever, caught in a silent exchange between human and beast, until suddenly the dragon jerked against its chains, pulling them taut with a metallic scream that echoed across the yard. The ground trembled, dust falling from broken walls, and both of them stumbled back, their hearts pounding. The dragon roared, a sound so deep and powerful it made the air shake, then fell silent again, its chest heaving, its eyes never leaving theirs. Fear surged through them, yet underneath the fear was something else: curiosity, wonder, and a question they could not ignore. Why was it here? Who had chained it, and for what reason? The silence that followed was heavier than the roar, pressing down on them until the woman finally whispered the truth neither wanted to say out loud. Someone had kept it here, someone had studied it, someone had built this entire base to hold it. And if that was true, then it meant the dragon was not just a monster in chains. It was a secret, one too big to remain hidden forever. The night dragged on slowly, heavy with the weight of what they had just seen, yet neither of them could bring themselves to leave. The dragon's golden eyes had burned into their minds, eyes too sharp and too deep to belong to a mindless beast. It had looked at them with something close to thought, something almost human, and that unsettled them more than anything else. They stood at a distance, their flashlights trembling in their hands, too afraid to step closer but too curious to turn away. The creature shifted again, and they could hear the chains groaning under its weight, thick steel links stretching but not breaking. The sound was unnatural, not the sound of an animal trapped in panic, but the sound of something old and powerful straining against its prison as if testing the limits. The man whispered that they should call someone, maybe the police, maybe scientists, but even as he spoke the words he knew how insane they sounded. Who would believe them if they said they had found a dragon chained in a military base? The woman said nothing, her eyes were locked on the creature's face. In the beam of the light she saw details, the scars that crisscrossed its scales, the ridges worn smooth by time, and most of all the eyes, two pools of gold that seemed to shine with their own inner fire. Those eyes were not filled with wild rage, they were filled with pain, with endurance, with a quiet plea. She felt her chest tighten as if the dragon was speaking directly to her without using words. She took one cautious step closer, and the dragon lowered its head ever so slightly, a slow movement that felt deliberate, controlled, careful. It was not threatening her. It was watching. She whispered softly, as if speaking to a wounded animal, her voice barely above the sound of the night breeze. The dragon's gaze followed her every word, and though it did not respond with sound, she could feel something stirring in her mind, like a distant echo that was not hers. It was gone as quickly as it came, but it left her trembling, her heart pounding with the impossible thought that the dragon had reached into her thoughts for a moment. The man grabbed her arm, pulling her back, whispering angrily that she was being reckless, but she pulled away, unable to break that strange connection. The dragon blinked slowly, the same way humans blink when trying to show trust, and she felt an unexpected calm settle inside her chest. Yet the calm lasted only a moment, for when the dragon shifted again, the chains around its wings rattled and they could see just how cruelly it was bound. Iron cuffs dug into its flesh, heavy links hammered deep into the concrete floor, pinning it down like a prisoner of war. Whoever had chained it had not only wanted to trap it, they had wanted to break it. The man finally lifted his flashlight higher, aiming at the dragon's neck, and both of them gasped when they saw the marks burned into its scales. Strange symbols, like brands, glowing faintly with some energy not of this world. The dragon flinched under the light, not in pain but as if ashamed, as if it did not want them to see. The woman whispered that this was no wild beast, it had been studied, tested, experimented on. The dragon's eyes narrowed at her words, and again she felt that faint echo in her mind, not a voice but an impression of sorrow, of long years trapped in silence. She shivered, realizing it was not imagination. The dragon was reaching out to her, not in words but in feelings, sharing its truth without sound. Suddenly a memory flashed across her mind, a picture that was not hers, men in white coats, machines humming, the dragon screaming as sparks of light tore across its body. She stumbled back, clutching her head, the vision gone in an instant but leaving her gasping for breath. The man caught her, his face pale as she whispered what she had seen. He shook his head in disbelief, but deep down he knew she was not lying. Something far stranger was happening here than they had ever imagined. The dragon growled softly, and though the sound should have been terrifying, it carried a strange comfort, as though it understood her pain. The golden eyes did not break away, holding her gaze with such intensity that she almost forgot to breathe. She whispered again, asking what it wanted, why it was here, who had done this to it, but of course no words came. Instead, the dragon pulled at the chains again, this time harder, the ground trembling beneath its strength. Dust fell from the broken walls, and the air filled with the sound of metal grinding against stone. The man panicked, pulling her back further, saying they needed to get out before the creature broke free, but even in his fear he could not look away from those eyes. They carried a weight, a story too big for words, and though he tried to deny it, he too felt the strange pull that his companion had felt. The dragon lowered its head again, breathing heavily, its chest rising and falling like waves of fire. The air grew warmer around them, the smell of smoke faint but undeniable. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the creature grew still. Its eyes softened, the golden light dimming like a dying star, and it looked at them not as captors or enemies, but as something closer to allies. In that moment, they both knew one thing with absolute certainty: the dragon was not asking for fear. It was asking for help. The night stretched on as they tried to rest inside one of the empty rooms, but sleep refused to come. The dragon's eyes haunted them whenever they closed their own, golden pools of sorrow and fire that carried secrets too heavy to ignore. The woman whispered in the dark that they could not just walk away, not when something so strange and powerful was chained like a prisoner, but the man argued that it was too dangerous, that whatever reason the military had for locking it away must have been serious. Yet even he could not deny the pull, the gnawing need to understand what had really happened here. As dawn crept slowly across the horizon, they decided to search deeper into the base, hoping to find answers. The main office building stood taller than the rest, its windows shattered, doors cracked open like a mouth daring them to enter. Inside, the air was thick with dust, papers scattered across the floor like autumn leaves. Filing cabinets leaned against the walls, some broken open, others still locked tight with heavy padlocks. The man kicked one, hearing the dull thud of weight inside, and his curiosity grew. They split up, searching room after room, until the woman called out softly. She had found a large steel door at the back of the building, half hidden behind broken shelves. Unlike the rest of the base, this door was intact, sealed with rusted bolts but not broken. Together they forced it open, the metal screeching like a wounded animal, and behind it lay a staircase leading down. The air below was colder, heavier, carrying with it the strange metallic scent they had noticed before, but stronger now, mixed with something sour that made their stomachs twist. They followed the narrow corridor into a room filled with cabinets, shelves, and boxes stacked high. Most of the boxes had military stamps and faded labels, but on one desk, under a broken lamp, lay a pile of files that looked different. They were marked with a single word stamped in red: classified. The man hesitated, his fingers hovering over the top file, then slowly he opened it. Inside were photographs, grainy black and white images of something that made his breath catch. They showed the dragon, younger, stronger, its wings stretched wide, its eyes blazing with fury as men in uniform surrounded it with weapons. Another photo showed it in chains, just like now, only the chains were glowing with strange energy. A third photo showed men in lab coats working on machines, beams of light striking the dragon's body as it roared in pain. The woman covered her mouth, unable to look any longer, her heart twisting with anger and pity. They flipped through more pages and found written reports, dry official words hiding terrible truths. The documents spoke of Project Seraph, a secret program designed to study and weaponize a creature not of Earth. The notes said the dragon had been discovered decades ago, not in the wild, but fallen from the sky during what locals thought was a meteor strike. The scientists had believed it was proof of life beyond Earth, a living weapon that could give them power greater than any nation. But the project had failed. The creature resisted control, its mind too strong, its power too dangerous. The reports grew more frantic, the handwriting rough as if written in haste, talking about unexplained events, the dragon reaching into the minds of the staff, machines shutting down on their own, shadows moving in ways they should not. The last report ended abruptly with a warning: containment is unstable, evacuation is required, the project must never be reopened. There were no signatures, no closure, only silence after that final page. The woman whispered that this was why the base was abandoned, why it had been left to rot. Not because it was useless, but because it was cursed with a secret too heavy to control. The man stared at the papers, his hands shaking as he read them again, trying to convince himself it was all lies, but the memory of the dragon's eyes told him otherwise. Those eyes had seen everything, endured everything, and still carried a plea for freedom. He slammed the folder shut, his chest tight with fear. They should leave, he insisted. They had learned enough. But the woman refused. She could not turn her back after knowing the truth, not when the creature had been tortured for decades in silence. As they argued, a sudden noise echoed through the corridor, a loud metallic click, followed by the hum of machines sparking back to life. Lights flickered weakly along the ceiling, one by one, until the entire underground room was glowing with cold, artificial light. Dust swirled in the air, and old speakers crackled faintly, as if the base itself was waking from a long sleep. They looked at each other in shock. Neither of them had touched anything, yet the systems were turning on by themselves. A loud beep sounded, and a red light began flashing on the far wall, next to a heavy metal door. The woman stepped closer, her heart pounding, and saw words appear on a cracked screen above the door: containment protocol active. The man pulled her back, fear sharpening his voice as he shouted that they needed to get out now, but before they could move, another sound rose from deep beneath the base. A roar, faint but unmistakable, answered by the rattling of chains above their heads. The dragon had felt it too. The base was waking, and whatever systems had been sleeping for decades were stirring again. The air vibrated with the hum of hidden power, and the red light continued to flash, pulsing like a heartbeat. The woman clutched the file against her chest, her eyes wide with dread and determination. The truth was clear now. The dragon was not a prisoner by accident. It had been locked here as part of something far larger, and the system that kept it chained was not dead. It was only sleeping. And now, it was awake. The flashing red light kept pulsing across the underground chamber, painting their faces in a cold glow as if warning them with every beat that they had crossed a line they were never meant to cross. The sound of old machines grinding awake filled the air, echoing down the long corridors like voices from the past. The man grabbed the woman's arm and begged her to leave, to run before the whole base came alive and trapped them inside, but she shook her head, clutching the classified file tighter against her chest. The dragon was not just an animal locked away for safety. It was a victim, a prisoner, and now they knew the truth. She could not simply abandon it. Their argument was cut short by the deep rumble from above, the unmistakable sound of chains being pulled tight and metal scraping against stone. The dragon had felt the awakening systems, its roars shaking the air with a mix of fear and fury. The ground itself trembled beneath their feet, dust falling from the ceiling, and the man realized that if they stayed any longer, they might not have a choice in what happened next. Still, the woman refused to leave without deciding. They climbed back up into the yard, the dawn light breaking weakly across the broken towers, but the base did not look like it had hours earlier. Faint lights flickered on in some of the buildings, powered by some old generator that should have been dead decades ago. Alarms, faint but steady, echoed across the empty yard like whispers of ghosts. The dragon was straining harder now, its golden eyes blazing, the heavy chains rattling with sharp cracks that echoed like gunfire. The woman stepped closer to the gate despite her fear, her voice trembling but clear as she whispered to the creature that they knew the truth, they knew what had been done. The dragon stilled for a moment, its chest heaving, its eyes narrowing as if it understood. Then, softly, it let out a sound that was not a roar but a low hum, a vibration that sank into their bones. She staggered, clutching her head as flashes of memory returned, visions that were not hers but poured into her mind from the dragon itself. She saw stars burning in the night sky, a great silver ship cutting through the darkness, and then fire, capture, and pain. She gasped and fell to her knees, tears in her eyes, overwhelmed by the images. The man pulled her up, shaking with fear, but before he could drag her away the dragon's gaze locked onto him as well. For the first time, he too felt the echo in his mind, not words but emotions, sorrow, loneliness, desperation, and then a faint spark of hope. He stumbled back, shaking his head, his breath ragged. It wanted freedom. It wanted release. But the choice was not simple. The documents they had read made one thing clear: the creature was not of Earth, its power far beyond human control, and those who had tried before had failed. If they broke the chains, what would stop it from unleashing its fury on everything around them? The man looked at the woman, his voice breaking as he asked if she was really ready to gamble not only with their lives but with everyone's. She stared at the dragon, seeing not a monster but a soul, beaten and bound for decades, and whispered that keeping it here was worse than death. The dragon let out a sharp growl, pulling at the chains again, and this time one of the links cracked, a loud metallic snap echoing through the base. The man cursed under his breath, panic flooding his chest as he realized the choice might soon be taken from them. Then, as if in response to his fear, the base itself began to change. Loudspeakers crackled to life with a distorted voice repeating over and over, "Containment breach detected, secure perimeter, activate defense protocols." Old searchlights flickered on, sweeping across the yard, and the ground shook as hidden doors slid open to reveal rusted turrets rising from the ground. The couple stumbled back, staring in shock as the base woke fully around them. The defenses, long asleep, were still alive, and they were pointing not at the humans but at the chained dragon. A high-pitched whine filled the air as the old weapons powered up, targeting systems blinking red. The dragon roared, its body thrashing against the chains, its eyes blazing with fury and fear. The woman screamed that they could not let this happen, that if the base fired now the creature would die after surviving decades of suffering. The man grabbed her shoulders, his voice desperate as he asked again if she was sure, if she really trusted a being they did not understand. She looked at him, tears streaming down her face, and said yes. Because for all its power and terror, the dragon's eyes had shown her something no weapon could fake. Trust. In that moment, alarms blared louder, the turrets locking in, ready to fire. The man cursed again and ran to the fence, pulling at the heavy chain that locked the gate. His hands tore and bled as he yanked and twisted, the metal biting into his skin. The woman joined him, her strength fueled by desperation, and together they fought the lock with everything they had. Behind them the turrets charged, sparks of energy glowing brighter, seconds from release. The dragon's growl grew into a thunderous roar, and with one final heave, it snapped another chain, the sound like thunder cracking the sky. The gate shuddered, the lock breaking under the couple's frantic effort, and the heavy metal swung open. The dragon surged forward, pulling free from its prison, wings snapping wide despite the broken chains still clinging to them. The ground shook with the force of its movement, and the couple stumbled back as a wave of heat swept across the yard. The turrets fired, bolts of energy tearing through the air, but the dragon swung its wings, a shield of fire bursting forth, melting the rusted weapons in an explosion of sparks. The alarms screamed, the base shuddered, and in the center of it all, the dragon stood free for the first time in decades, its eyes blazing as they turned to the humans who had chosen to trust it. The dragon stood tall, its wings spread wide, chains still dangling from its body as smoke curled from its nostrils and fire lit the air around it, and for the first time the man and woman saw not a prisoner but a king who had been stripped of his crown and forced into silence for far too long. The base alarms howled louder, the ground rumbling with the weight of hidden systems reactivating, but the turrets were already gone, melted and shattered by the beast's fury. The couple stared up at the creature, their hearts pounding, unsure if they had done the right thing, because in its eyes burned not just gratitude but something far more dangerous, power unchained. The dragon looked at them, lowering its head slowly until its golden eyes met theirs, and for a moment they felt the weight of its mind pressing against theirs again, flooding them with visions, images of a sky filled with fire, of worlds burning, of fleets of ships in the void, of chains forged not by men but by other creatures who looked nothing like humans. The woman gasped and stumbled back, realizing with horror that the dragon's story was not just about this base, not just about Earth, but about a war stretching across the stars. The man grabbed her hand, pulling her away, but the dragon's presence kept them locked in place, their minds swimming with truths too heavy to carry. Then, with a final roar, it spread its wings fully, the force knocking them to the ground as it leapt into the sky, shattering the air with a thunderous crack that echoed across the valley. The base shook violently, walls crumbling, as if the very ground knew its prisoner had escaped. The couple scrambled to their feet, coughing through dust and smoke, staring upward as the dragon soared higher, breaking through the clouds, its roar fading into the distance. For a long moment there was silence, broken only by the dying alarms of the base. They looked at each other, neither speaking, both overwhelmed by the enormity of what had just happened. But then, slowly, the systems around them began to hum again. Screens flickered on across the ruined yard, and broken loudspeakers hissed with static before a voice, cold and metallic, spoke clearly, containment breach confirmed. Subject Seraph freed. Initiating Protocol Omega. The man froze, his stomach dropping as red symbols appeared across the screens, lines of code racing faster than he could read. The woman clutched his arm, her voice trembling as she asked what Protocol Omega meant, but he already feared the answer. Sirens blared, sharper this time, not alarms of defense but warnings of something far worse. The ground split open in several places, massive steel doors sliding back as enormous shapes began to rise, machines the size of buildings, their surfaces covered in rust and dust, but their weapons glowing with fresh energy. They were not turrets this time but colossal war machines, slumbering giants built for a single purpose, to destroy the creature they had just released. The woman screamed that they had to run, and they stumbled back toward the broken fences, but even as they moved the machines turned, their eyes glowing red, targeting not the dragon above but everything around them. The man realized with horror that Omega was not about saving Earth, it was about burning the evidence, destroying the base, the land, maybe even them, so no one would know the truth. They raced across the yard as the first machine fired, a beam of energy ripping through the old buildings, tearing them apart like paper. Fire exploded behind them, heat searing their backs as they leapt over broken walls and debris. Above, the dragon circled back, its golden eyes locking onto the machines, and with a scream of fury it dove, unleashing a river of fire that melted steel like wax. One machine toppled, crashing into the ground, but three more rose in its place, weapons spinning with deadly force. The dragon fought savagely, its roars echoing like thunder, but even its power could not end the battle quickly. The man pulled the woman into a ditch, shielding her from the blasts, and whispered that maybe they had doomed everything by setting it free. She shook her head, her voice firm despite her fear, saying no, they had given it a chance, and maybe Earth needed to know the truth. The ground shook again as the dragon's fire met the machine's weapons, a storm of light and flame filling the valley. But then, suddenly, all the screens across the base flickered once more, and a new voice replaced the automated system. This voice was calm, deep, and carried a weight that made their skin crawl. It said, "I am Seraph. I was never a prisoner of your world. I was sent here to wait." The couple froze, looking up in shock, realizing the voice was not coming from the speakers alone but inside their own minds. The dragon's eyes glowed brighter, and they understood, it was speaking directly to them, its true voice clear now that the chains were gone. The dragon rose above the machines, its wings blazing with light, and it declared that the war across the stars was not over, that Earth was not hidden as its people believed, and that the enemies who had once chained it were already coming. The man and woman clung to each other as the truth crashed down on them like a wave. This was not just about one base or one dragon, but about a future where Earth itself might become the next battlefield. The machines below kept firing, the dragon kept burning, and in the chaos the couple realized their lives would never be the same. They had opened the door to something greater than themselves, and now there was no going back.